Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have a request from Michelle and Goldie to answer some questions with the recent bunch of poems I put out and the new book. I realize I'm getting new viewers to this channel, and so even though I have done videos about these topics, I feel there's no reason not to just recover some of this ground. I don't know if I could find all the videos. If you scroll through my backlog, to be sure, you will find answers to these questions in more detail, but I'll just give a cursory little answer to give you and other folks an overview. I had briefly considered that when my channel reaches 2,000 subscribers, I could do another Q&A. I did one at 1,000 subscribers, and but to take a line from Steve Donahue, I know that that will never happen. So I might as well answer some a little bit in advance, and then if that hallowed day ever arrives, we will take it as it comes and make a decision at that point. So I'm still new to your channel, so if you have already done this, pardon my request. Would you please consider producing a video talking a bit about any or all of the following? And there's all of the following. Certainly, I'm happy to. Yourself and your background. I was a suburban kid, grew up in a small family with a mother and father and an older sister. And the next one is how you've come to be a writer, and that leads right into the answer about childhood. In 6th grade, a teacher assigned the class to write a poem. I guess he must have been having a poetry. He was introducing us to poetry for the first time. And he showed us a photo of something of a ship deck. I can't remember the photo exactly, and told us to write a poem about it. And I went home and wrote my first poem. Do you only write poems? Yes, sort of. I have 3 books of prose, one of which is up on Lulu. Prose does not come easily to me, so I've dabbled at it. Can't really say that I've had any successful results to come from it. I've never, ever attempted beyond the occasional literary essay. I've never, ever attempted anything like a novel or something like a scientific treatise or anything like that. So poetry is what I do. Poetry and plays is what I did. I don't really consider myself a writer, but if you know my career, there have been now 3 distinct times, I think, when I have professed to be done with writing and I wound up going back to it. So I don't see any reason to write anymore, but that could change. I've said that if I could figure out a way to write plays again, that I would consider doing so. I really enjoyed that. How have you managed to avoid Microsoft Word while being a writer? Please note, this is not a criticism. I'm just amazed because I thought there was a chip implanted in all of us by now. I have not avoided it. I just do not spend a lot of time at a computer screen. I write in a notebook. A further question was what implements that you require. And I use a notebook, a spiral notebook, and a pen. And well, let me see. if I can. This is my pen of choice. So, but I don't need it. I can use anything. And there was a phase when I was younger that I was writing in those yellow notepads, not really as practical. So while I was happy with that, when I switched over to those 70-page notebooks, I never went back. And the 70-page notebooks are ideal because one of those can fit an entire play. Which is just handy. But I don't do any writing, or very little, at the computer. Now, I have an iPad, so I do sometimes write at the iPad, but very, very minimally if I'm just lazy or whatever. So Microsoft Word has always been what I need to use to, I guess, transcribe what was written in the notebook into a typed copy. So I've never mastered it. I've only learned things along the way because I didn't have a class. And then programs have changed, and what you used to know how to do. And I am absolutely forgetful. So when I come back, I think the last time that I used Microsoft Word was 2 years ago. I can't remember the book, probably the one about sonnets. And unless it was the one, Tales of the Knights. No, probably the one about sonnet, probably the Sonnets second series. And it's like I'm a blank slate again. I have to relearn everything because I just don't remember that kind of stuff. It doesn't particularly interest me. And it's never been in any of my low-level clerical jobs when I was doing them. That was never the main feature. I did a lot of data entry, but you wouldn't use Microsoft Word for that. So what physical tools do you use to write? I answered that. What do you hope to achieve ultimately? I don't have any hopes at this point. I'm done, as I say, with writing. Anything I've achieved, I have achieved already. And I don't know. It's for me, it's been a relationship with the Muse, and I have tried to be a faithful servant to the Muse and been honest in going about the task. And I think I have largely done that. I think if you betray your poetic muse, she will not come back to you, quite possibly. It's a relationship, so you don't know. I can't speak with great authority. Do you have favorite writers? Yeah, I've got. I mean, every writer is my favorite writer, though. So it would be hard to single out a particular writer here or there, and that, of course, goes for poetry and not poetry. When I was young, the very early writers were, say, Franz Kafka and Emily Dickinson, Dante Alighieri, John Keats, Wilfred Owen, Claude McKay. You'll see them come up on this channel often enough, so it will be obvious. But they're not favored in, say, some kind of a hierarchical relationship against other writers or poets. They're just writers that had a meaningful impact upon me very early upon the journey. And as I've continued, I realize that they are not the only ones, and there are others, but nevertheless, that place that they hold in my heart, in my experience, well, they cannot be dislodged. I should say, early, there were 4 prose writers that I really enjoyed. One was Theodore Dalrymple. That's a pseudonym. He really leaned into his right-wingness or right-wing nutness as time went along, and so I became unenamored of him. Another was Sven Burkert's, particularly a book which he did titled Writings. And when I went back and found it a couple of years ago, I just could not stand it. I did not know what I had seen in him. And then there was Michael Ventura, who I have gone back to recently on this channel, and I think that his stuff holds together for me. And the 4th one, I never seem to remember, so I can't answer that. Those were like people who wrote essays. As far as novelists, can't think off the top of my head. And the poets you can gather from those names I just mentioned. Who, what is your muse? Oh, I missed that one. And that's a tough question. Everything that I write in terms of poetry is based upon an encounter with the muse. So going back to childhood, when I was a wee laddie of 8 years old, I fell in love, and that girl became a muse. I fell out of love with her at some point, and then there followed a succession of muses, if you will, people that I was in love with. And I was in my late 20s when I was figuring out my mature poetic style, if you will. Now that's not really said right, because I wasn't figuring. Afterwards, I realized I had figured out my mature style. I was figuring out my style, figuring out what I was doing. And at one time I broke things down. Every poem derives from a reality. You can't just make something up whole cloth. Now, you can use your imagination or whatever, but if you trace it back, and I can do that sometimes, I think, every single poem that I write can be traced back to that encounter with that young girl back in whatever, when I was 8. But then there was a time when I was really figuring things out, and I gave myself basically 4 muses. 2 of them were imaginary, I guess you would say, people that I felt things about that there was no relationship with. 2 of them were people that there were relationship with. 3 of them were female, 1 of them was male. And when I would write, I realized that any line that I wrote would trace itself back to something pertaining to one of those 4. And since that time, it has blown apart pretty much. I can no longer look at things that way. And anything can prompt me into song, basically. There is always, as I say, some sort of efficient cause at back of it, but whether it's just something I see or an actual something that happens, oftentimes it's just a great fear. I'm afraid of something, and that pushes me into action. But there's always some real life event. If I say I did something in a poem, I did something, I think for the most part, I mean, you are allowed a little poetic embellishment. So there is a video where I talked about how I mentioned a dead leaf in our tenement. It was not a tenement. It was a slum building in a very good neighborhood. It was my first apartment. And it was not a dead leaf. It was a dead fly. But you have to sort of use conventional imagery just as you would in talking. You have to make yourself sensible to whoever might be reading. So a dead fly would carry a whole bunch of different connotations, but the message, the meaning, was exactly derived from an insight which occurred to me that particular afternoon or whatever in that apartment. That's from my book, Embodiment and Release, and it's the one about going to see the moon, and that jumbles a couple of different things because the Mid-Autumn Festival was an experience which had happened in Taiwan, going to see the moon, and but the seasonal change and all of that was occurring to me at that time in my apartment in Chicago, and those things kind of fused together. I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent here. But, you know, you don't just make something up. So it was, do you have favorite writers? How about favorite books? It's really hard because my favorite book tends to be whichever book I'm looking at the moment. There have been books that have been quite important to me. I think I did a video showing my three, and I can't remember now what they were, but obviously one would have been Evidence and Models by the ancient historian M.I. Finley or Moses Finley. That remains an important book to me. It's not a book that I need to touch back to very much, but again, it really helped guide me along my path. My complete edition of Emily Dickinson's poems is a favorite book, although again, I don't really, insofar as I am a writer, I don't read anything. Right now, this channel on BookTube is trying to document my practice as a reader. Throughout all this time of being a writer, I did not read very much. I read what I had to. I felt I needed to educate myself, and so I read. I felt I needed to become more literate or more literary, and so I read. But it was not something that was innate to me real strongly. I mean, I had a little bit of the impetus to read here and there. And if I wrote a poem, I'm not a poem, a play. One of my plays was about the African statesman Jomo Kenyatta. And so I read everything that I could about him as research. And I had planned to do another big African-themed play, and I compiled all of the books, and they were just too many. It would take me decades to read them unless I were to kick my reading speed up to Steve Donahue levels. That is, stripping away the subvocalizing and having that clear focus. And I have not done that. I have not stripped away the subvocalizing. I've tried now and again. and I've never gotten that focus. Now, when I write, that's a different matter. I get that level of focus. Favorite music, musicians. And there again, when I was a lad, I really liked Buddy Holly. And I liked all of those early rockabilly and early rockers. I liked all of that stuff. But no, even there, I mean, as far as I had a number of songs and singers from the 50s, pre-rock and roll era, which I really enjoyed, and even into the 40s. I liked the Andrews Sisters because when I was a lad, I watched Abbott and Costello movies that I liked very much, and they were often in there. So I have different things. Other things, I think it was Ted Lewis. His shtick was he would say, "Is everybody happy?" or something like that. And he was in one of those movies. And I think at some point I tried him. I got one of his albums, and it didn't really float my boat. But over the years, I much prefer music live. And so we go we have all kinds of music in Chicago. Most of it during the course of my life has been available for free. And then when it's not, because you've had so much that is free, you are willing to pay here and there to attend a concert. And I like anything that's free. I mean, not anything that, well, I do too. I like anything that's live. So we have the Old Town School of Folk Music, and the music scene is a little bit more troublesome because right now fascism is trying to take over the country, and musicians are not traveling. Those that are traveling are sometimes winding up in jail or in the gulag or whatever. We don't know what's going on. So people with any sense are not traveling to the United States. But before this, there was just so much international music festivals and stuff going on in Chicago, not to mention the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And we just attended a concert conducted by Riccardo Muti. And you have to love Riccardo Muti. I mean, we were fortunate we were in the terrace seats, which is where you're sitting sort of above the orchestra. And so you're looking into the conductor's face. And as somebody who has done some choral singing, it's just wonderful to see a conductor and see the expressions on his face and every least gesture that you may not observe from the audience. I mean, for Muti, what was the thing Swami Vivekananda said? Give me that whipped cream. I don't need the rest of your strawberry shortcake. Well, give me the expressions on Muti's face, and I don't need the rest of the music. Just a silent video of him for that 2-hour concert minus intermission would be something to watch in and of itself. Do you enjoy other forms of artistic expression? Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you're talking about whether I perform them, I like breaking out into a song, that has happened. As far as being a consumer, I don't go to theater anymore. After I gave up writing theater, I see no reason for it. Now I prefer things like live music. I prefer things like dance. I'm not sure. I can't right off the top of my head think of what else might be called artistic expression. And I should say, just as a footnote, it's questionable whether poetry can be considered expression at all. Who are your furry friends? Well, I've done a video in the past where it was sort of, where are they now? And I took the camera and I went around and just showed everybody who was there. I don't know the title of that video, but you would have to hunt it down to find out who they all are. Just, we live with these critters. A number of them are refugees. They came from Cairo, Egypt, where the situation is terrible for cats. If you ever hear the stories of how cats are treated in Istanbul, Cairo is not Istanbul, and it is an absolute treacherous existence to be a cat in Cairo. So we have adopted a number of cats from there, and they are different to any cats you will find in America. I think because they all come from a long line of alley cats that hail back to the ancient Egyptians. There's been intermixing and so forth, obviously, but they're just a different. I mean, they're still cats. They're still house cats, and they're very affectionate, as you've seen. But there's a qualitative difference, and I don't mean that in terms of better or worse. You can't say that, but there is a different quality about these cats, and they come with lots of problems too. There's been health problems and so forth. So you cannot, adopting a cat from Egypt is not for the faint of heart, but it is a rewarding experience. Sometimes they do arrive and they have bad health problems, and you may wind up having to foot the bill for that. And one cat that we were in process of adopting, his flight parents, they had gone over to Egypt to adopt a cat. Well, it's more complicated than that, and it's an incredible story. I think the guy was over there in the military or something, and a cat out of nowhere found him. And so he got in touch with the shelter, and they pieced it together so he was able to adopt this cat. And so since they were coming to the U.S., they volunteered to be flight parents for this cat that we were adopting. And they got him to the U.S., and this cat, who was a beautiful cat, took sick. Nobody knew what happened, and died fairly quick. Nobody understood that story, so we never got the cat. Really, really, really terrible situation. How did you acquire such an extensive vocabulary, and do you use any specific thesaurus, etymology, quote, style, reference manuals while writing? Yes, and I perhaps should do a separate video on that, but my go-to dictionary has always been the Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Just the collegiate one has been fine. I have the giant one. I have it nicely in 3 volumes. The what do they call them? Unabridged? I don't know, but it's this thick, And on rare occasions, I will use that if I need it, but not much. I use the free app on my iPad mostly, but Merriam-Webster's, there have been occasions when I've gone to something else, like the what is that huge one, the Oxford something or other. It's in a bunch of volumes. I have it in hard copy in the basement, but I never use it. If I had space, I would put it on a shelf and maybe dip into it occasionally, but space considerations prevent that. But a good dictionary is necessary. And generally, I liked in their day all of the Merriam-Webster reference books. I have a video in which I show all of them, and there was one that was like a one-volume encyclopedia that Merriam-Webster put out, and it was a very handy book. But for most of that kind of stuff, now, if you need some information, you can generally just find something online. So all of these reference books are not so useful, probably with the exception of the rhyming dictionary. If I am just writing poetry, generally speaking, the muse comes and inspires you, and you do not need the help of a rhyming dictionary. But as in the case of this recent experience, wrong side, sorry. Again. Over the course of, say, 100 days, I wrote over 400 poems. And the only thing I gave up from my life in order to do this was I gave up reading. All the rest of my life continued as normal. So I didn't have unbroken blocks of time as you would need to write, say, an epic poem. And so there were days when I would bet I wrote something like 20 poems, certainly 15 poems. And regardless, even if I only wrote one that day, it was likely under circumstances in which my time was real short. So it was compressed. And when you are writing at that level, you have to use anything that comes to hand. I mean, there is no way that my own mind could contain all those rhymes, and there's nothing good online as far as finding rhymes. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the rhyming dictionary that I use. But so, you know, if you're going to write a poem in which you use 20 words all rhyming on the same sound, you best have your ducks in a row beforehand. And you can do that certainly without a rhyming dictionary, because the best rhyming dictionary is flawed and will omit things. So you can't depend upon it, let me put it that way, for your rhymes. You certainly can't depend upon it. And then as far as vocabulary, I think it's just if you read poetry, you build your vocabulary. There was a booktuber who criticized a poem by Richard Eberhart because it used the word multitudinous. And I recently realized Thomas Hardy had used multitudinous in one of his poems. He was approaching poetry from a more of a journalistic standpoint. If you're writing for the newspaper, as this man does, you want to keep your vocabulary simple, because I think newspaper readers are at something like a 4th grade level in their reading. But for poetry, I have always taken the opposite view. There is no word that you should prohibit yourself. Even if it's yclept, Y-C-L-E-P-T, you should not prohibit yourself from using any single word that is out there. And in fact, it could even be a goal to actually employ every single one of those words. But as far as writing them in a poem, and even in my prose, just because I write a word does not mean I know the word or know what it means. I'll just use something because it sounds good. Do you teach? Have you taught? No. Except briefly when I was living in Taiwan, I did my stint, or my stints, as an English as a second language teacher. I was never good at teaching. So I wound up not going that route. Are you always serious? That's kind of a odd question. Of course, when I'm making a video talking about a book, I'm just doing what I'm doing. Most of the time, I live with what is the word? Menagerie of animals. There are a lot of little souls running around here doing their thing. And you cannot be particularly serious. In fact, you're in the moment mostly responding to things. Early on, it was responding to things with rage, but most often, what goes on around this abode is peals of laughter. But as a writer, I guess, yeah, you would say, yeah, sure, I've been serious. Anything else you would like to share with us? Well, I will leave that there. I've got almost a 40-minute video. This is just a refresher. We'll see when I approach 2,000 subscribers, which is never going to happen. If I put out a call for more questions. Actually, it's a nice feature. When other booktubers do Q&As, I love them. And one is always happy to talk about oneself, I think. I find discussing the poetic process to be interesting. And I would guess it's interesting to people because not everybody has had this lived experience. I'm taking it back to the girl that I fell in love with when I was 8 years old. Not everybody has this experience. And when I read Dante for the first time, and I was still pretty young, I said, oh, my goodness, he had this same experience. He knows what it's like. It's not the other way around. It's not that you read something and then you tailor your experience to fit some ideal path that you want to go down. The experience comes first. So I will stop off there, and Michelle, if I'm saying that right, this is Michelle and Goldie. Thank you for asking me all those questions. It was not a presumption or an imposition in the least. I had my window of opportunity here this morning, and so I am happy to oblige. Thank you, and thank everybody for stopping by my channel.